All right. What does that actually mean?
Nothing useful.
Yeah, nothing useful.
Defining rest.
Just like talk about it. What is it?
Like a way to is it like a transfer? Like a transference between like RESTful API. Alright, maybe just
That was nothing, Sky. Alright, so
maybe just CRUD.
CRUD. Okay, that's a good way to start.
Because I was gonna say like an endpoint to hit, but that's the API part. So that's like RESTful API.
Yep. So, but it is frequently associated with, almost always, I think, in fact, part of its definition is that it's associated with a specific type of data transference, which uses what?
Isn't it like a set of like standards?
It's a set of standards. Mm-hmm. Yep. So, and that is the API piece of it, application programming interface, expectations of what we expect to consume, how we expect to consume it. We expect to consume it how? As HTTP, so that's the transfer protocol. So it's not over TCP, it's not over FTP, it's an HTTP, UDP, it's none of those things. It's over HTTP. We generally send data in what format?
JSON.
JSON.
That's much useful in XML.
Yeah, it's a lot nicer than XML craziness. Okay, good. Now, if we were to translate, what is the route that I would go to create a person? It would be fullmeasure.io / persons. Anything else? No.
ID.
Is there an ID or no?
No, it's just persons. Don't you send it with the request is different.
The request method is different. What's the request method? Post. What do we send as the payload?
Can you define payload?
Yeah.
No. What else do we send to the server? Data. Payload. Data. What is the data?
Data that we're sending.
What is the data that we're sending?
Right.
It's JSON of what?
JSON
of the post.
Parameters to create the thing.
The parameters to create the thing, whatever you're trying to create. In our case, is a person. So, what are some examples of what that might be? Yeah, name. Okay, that's all I'm trying to get to. I'm just trying to get you guys to be more explicit. Data means nothing. Everything is data. Okay. The data. We're sending the data. Yeah, what data? Okay. All right, and that's something you'll learn too. So a lot of the times, your tendency when you first start writing code is to create variables or functions that are called data or info. That means nothing to anybody except for you in that moment in time, because it's all data, it's all info. Okay, so try to be more explicit than that. All right, so that's a post. If we want to do an update, what's the route? Put. Close. That's not the route. That's the
Persons.
verb or. So persons is the route. We're getting closer. Okay.
The verb or the method.
The verb or the method, the request method, is put. The route is what? Persons slash ID, because you want to update a specific one, right? That's why the ID comes after it. When you post, there isn't one to update. So you're creating one and it doesn't exist yet, so that's why you don't send an ID. Okay. If we wanted to view all of our persons, how do we do that? What's the route?
Show.
Well, persons.
It's going to be the index, so it's just a get.
It's just a get for the, what's that called?
The HTTP verb.
The verb or the request method, yep, is a get, and we're going to go to the route. Persons. Is there an ID? No. In full measure, what else could we add to the route? In the way that we write, the way that we do REST in particular.
Could you query the route? You can query on the route.
You can query on the route. What do you mean by that? I think you're on the right track.
You could, you could. So when you go to show and show all your people, you could query in the URL. Well, you can't query in the URL, but
what
parameters?
Yeah, parameters. What do those parameters look like in a URL?
Question mark.
There you go. There you go. So you can send query parameters. They're called query parameters. question mark, first name equals Sam, last name equals, etc. And what that's going to return to you in the full measure gem of rest is the person who has a first name of Sam, last name of Birk. All right. If we wanted to show a particular person and we know their ID, what's the route that we go to?
Person/ID.
Person/ID. And that'll give you. And what's the request method? Get. And what's that going to give back? It gives back to us exactly one person, right? No array. It's just exactly one person. If we wanted to delete a particular person and we know their ID, how do we do that?
Person/delete.
Person/ID.
Person slash
yeah.
Specific one.
person/ID, and the request method is delete. Okay. So let's go back through that again. So if I want to, but it's a slightly different question. If I want to create a person, I go to the route of /persons, no ID. I send up a payload of information about that person. The request method is post. What's the controller action that I hit?
Create.
Create. What is the What is the model method that I use? Yeah. So to create, also create. Okay. If I want to view a list of all the persons on the table, what is the controller action that I hit?
Is the index.
Index. And what is the model method that I use? Where. Okay. And if it was actually all of them, it might be all. Okay. What is the, if I want to see a specific user, what is the controller action that I hit? Show. And what is the model method that I use? Find. If I want to delete a user, what is the controller action that I hit? Controller method that I hit?
Destroy.
Yeah, it's destroy.
Just destroy.
I don't think there's a delete. They do like to have like multiple named, but I think destroys it. And then what is the model function that I call? Actually, in that case, it's either. The difference between destroy and delete typically is that destroy actually calls hooks. So oftentimes you'll have like a person has many to-do list items, and you'll say has many to-do list items dependent destroy. And what that'll say is when I destroy this person, also go through and delete all of their to-do list items. If you called person.delete, it wouldn't go through and delete all of their. Okay, so generally speaking, we want to use destroy, but technically for the question that I asked, delete or destroy is true. Okay. All right. I don't know what that means. All right. We got to see how we can make stuff actually show up and all that. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to move back. So we've talked about classes, we talked about inheritance, we talked about static and instance methods. Let's just do some definitional stuff real quick. So what is inheritance?
Takes in all the attributes of its parent class.
Attributes and
Functionality methods.
functionality methods functions. Yeah, okay. What is the what is a static versus an instance method?
Static is an action that is like taken on the class, and instance is a specific instance, so it needs to be instantiated.
Okay, that's good. So if I want to call a static method, like if I have a person model and I want to call the static method say hello, how do I do that?
Model dot say hello.
Okay. What does the definition of that method look like in Rails?
So def self.
Self dot. Okay. So you declare static methods with a self dot. What about if I want to call a instance method for a person that say hello? How do I call that?
Dot new dot say hello.
Yep. And how do I define that?
Def say hello.
Def say hello. That's it. Okay. All right. What is the advantage of using instance methods over static methods? Or what are some of the advantages?
Instance methods carry state.
Yep, they carry state. That's a good way of putting it. So the instance variables can be shared across instance methods, but they can't be shared across static methods. Although it looks like Rails maybe does weird crap based on what we saw last time.
Classes.
I'm sorry. Instance variables can be shared across methods, But no, they can't be shared across classes. No. So everything's scoped. So everything's within a class and then within the method, but you can share instance variables outside of methods. That's what's so cool about it, is generally speaking, scoping causes the information to be scoped to the method. You can't share variables from one method to another, which is what happens with static methods. But in the case of an instance, you've instantiated that class, and that class then becomes a scope in and of itself, and it's allowed to then share certain types of variables across methods. Okay, which is beautiful about
Do you guys
instances.
use static methods too?
We do.
You do.
So like Active Record, for example, uses lots of static methods. So like person.where, person.find, those things are all static methods that are being defined, not by us, but by them. So we use them all the time. We will use static methods in a couple of cases. One, in TypeScript, when we get to that, we'll use static methods for things that are like utilities that we're just trying to run quickly. It's something that like it's usually just a transformation that's a pretty small amount of code, but we're going to put it into its own unit. So for example, when we're trying to get the parameters from the URL, we have a thing called route service, and we'll say route service.params, and it just goes and gets the parameters and gives them back to us, and we can do something with it. We don't need to instantiate anything because it's like one line of code to get those parameters, and so we're not like trying to create lots of methods where we're sharing the instance variables across, and that's a lot shorter syntax than new route service.params. Route service open close parentheses. So it's just like a shorter syntax to use. The other reason that we will use static methods is in cases where, yeah, that's pretty much it. When we want like a quick, and we do the same thing in Rails. If you want a quick helper method, then you'll use static methods. But generally speaking, we'll use instance methods. All right. In fact, like we didn't use static methods at all here until a year and a half ago or something. So yeah, there's no need ever to use static methods. Okay. What is an advantage of using static methods though beyond just it's shorter to write? There is one other thing we talked about a little bit. Think about performance.
Okay, the fact that it is not carrying state.
You don't store the objects.
You don't store the entire instantiated object. You just run the function. So the memory footprint is much smaller.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like functional programming and then like, you're training stuff up with recursion, you got all these static things going on. You save out on the storage of not instantiating anything, but every call, the activation record. So like, is that storage less than instantiating the object in memory? Like, just making a call to a function regardless, that comes with storage.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, not even just storage, but the processing work that has to be done. So that is one of the disadvantages of static methods at times, is that there are times when you want to be able to cache a result set. So like I might want to do this big SQL query that's very non-performant, but then once I get the result set, I want to call that result set multiple times and then do something with it. If you had it as a static method, there's no inherent caching mechanism. In instance methods, there are, because you set it equal to an instance variable, and so long as you have access to the instance of the class, that instance variable remains the same. So you don't call that big query over and over and over again. If you use a static method, every time you call a static method, it reruns it because there's no caching mechanism. Now you could like in that static method have a Redis connection and you cache it to Redis, and then you're using a persistent state outside. But like it's not ideal. It's very simple to use instance variables to cache things, and so that's frequently what we do. And then when you're done with the instance, you move away from the class, or you destroy the instance or whatever, and it's gone. And memory goes away. Okay. So there are certainly performance disadvantages to using static methods as well. There's ways around them. There's always a way around everything. But that's where it all goes back to the fundamentals of programming: functions, if-else, loops, variables, classes. You understand those 5 things, there's always a way around everything else, because you can use those 5 things to get around everything else. Yeah. That's why we spend so much time on this. All right. So, pretty good idea of what controllers are, how they work, class methods, static methods. Rails in general, what's going on, right? So let's go through model view controller again. What is the model?
Database.
Database, yeah. It's the layer directly above a table on a database. So if there's a person model, there's probably a person's table in your database. It's the way to get data in and out of the table. What does a controller do?
It's the functionality, the middleman, the trigger guy.
Yeah. So the easiest way to think, so all those things are right. The easiest way to think about it in the Rails world is it's when an endpoint gets hit on the internet. So like if somebody goes to fullmeasure.io/persons, the thing that gets hit is something in a controller. That's where things get directed. There's magic behind the scenes that like gets it to there, but in terms of what you're thinking about, when you hit an endpoint, you end up at some function on the controller. The controller then, in that action, does whatever it's going to do. Usually, it's just a call to a model, which is calling to the database. Okay. And then a view is what? What you see. It's the UI, it's the UX, it's the browser, the stuff that's there. It's usually JavaScript, CSS, HTML. Okay? All right, cool with that? All right. Has everybody worked with the Fetch API yet? Have you guys? No? Okay. That's fine. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to create some JavaScript code that's going to do a create, update, delete, and get. Okay, we're going to use Fetch to do that. It's a pretty straightforward library. It is.
Are you recording?
Yeah, I am. Thanks. It's part of the default JavaScript now. This is so much better than when I was a kid. When I was learning how to code, when I was a kid, when I was like 22.
I was like,
Yeah.
Prodigy.
Yeah. No, I didn't start coding until I was 23, really. Yeah, and then I didn't become a professional coder until I was 29. So, all right. So, Fetch shows you there's some very simple methods in Fetch, but it'll let you do all the things that we've done so far. You can see like here's an example of an update. It's hitting an endpoint with a method, adding some body data into it. Okay. We're going to create a little function bag that's just going to give us one of each of these methods, and we're just going to hit our person endpoint and try and do some creation, deletion, etc. So. Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, capture now.
Who can tell me what the difference between doing get checkout -b, same HTTP request, and doing get checkout without the -b, same HTTP request?
It's not created, it will create
Yeah.
dash.
So don't use -b if it already exists. Just do get checkout. All right. I only do that really because I just realized one of the guys from last intern class is always doing the -b. And it's just it's a little thing because we don't talk about it all that frequently after the first time we do, and then it's easy to get.
Get sauce.
Oh yeah, get sauces everywhere. All right. So we're just going to create some real simple examples. So let's just create a get function. And this is going to be, actually, we're going to name these things consistent with what we do on the Rails side, just to help you guys understand what they're doing. And then basically all you're doing is calling the Rails function on that model from the front end, if that makes sense, right? That's more or less how we've set up the REST controller to work. So we can have the where method with some parameters, and then, oh, I never fixed that piece of it. and I'm probably not going to, but that's all right. And then we can do something like fetch the URL, which in our case, what's our URL?
We get persons.
Yeah. People, I think it is.
Can you zoom
H2,
in
yeah.
a little bit?
127 point.
Technically correct, but what is the what is this thing?
That's the port.
What is a port?
Port is literally think about it as a door to listen to at an IP address.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So what is typically happening on a server is that, I mean, there's like tons and tons of ports, but on each port you have